Hello there and welcome. This is as always Mikhail or Michael speaking, and before the video starts I want to say thank you all who decided to support me financially, be it through Patreon, PayPal or Super Thanks. I really appreciate your help and generosity, so thank you friends and have a blessed day. Now today's video I will start of course with the general Kharkiv direction, where throughout last week Russian forces were continuously and successfully were advancing in the general direction of the village of Lypzi and second biggest city in Ukraine, Kharkiv, and attacked on a much wider front to the northeast of Kharkiv in the general attempt to capture the city of Vovchansk. And so far, the offensive continues without delays. First things first, let's discuss the situation that is currently unraveling within the village of Lypzi. 24 hours ago, Russian forces successfully captured the village of Lypzi and successfully withstood Ukrainian counterattacks. After that, they significantly increased the buffer zone around this village, and after that went on the assault inside the northern outskirts of the Lypzi village. Within the last 24 hours, the battles in this small residential area were a site of very hard and bloody battles. Here, Ukrainians actively counterattacked in an attempt to stop Russian advance, which at first it seems they were able to do so. On the internet, a video showed of Ukrainians clearing a portion of this area. Some Ukrainian sources went as far as to claim that this entire area has been cleared by the Ukrainians and that Ukrainians re-entered the village of Lypzi. However, this couldn't be more further from the truth. If we go to a pro-Ukrainian map and look at its latest update, we can see that in fact the situation changed in favor of the Russians, with Ukrainian formations retreating deeper into this residential area. It is important to note that Ukrainian counterattack did really happen and initially saw some success, but almost immediately Russians counterattacked back and not only retook recently lost positions, but even gained more territories. Here is exactly how much territories Russians took within the last 24 hours. So as you can see, despite continuous Ukrainian attempts to turn the tide of this battle, for now, the Russians emerge victorious. For example, here on this video, you can see Russians using Lancet drones in order to damage or destroy Ukrainian abandoned armored vehicles. Those said armored vehicles were used to transport Ukrainian platoons to the zero line, and the fact that those two vehicles are standing abandoned could mean that those who were inside lost their lives on the zero line. Generally speaking, obviously, Ukrainians will not give up and will continue to counterattack, ignoring all casualties, and will do everything in their power to at least slow down Russian advance. One of the reasons why Lypzi is so important for both Russians and Ukrainians is because not only there is a very important road which goes through Lypzi and all the way to Kharkiv, which Russians will certainly use to their advantage, but the worst of all is that with the fall of Lypzi, the city of Kharkiv will be in reach of Russian artillery. And with Russian superiority in artillery and aviation, this will quickly turn into a catastrophe. Situation is already difficult as it is, as most of the roads that lead to Lypzi are already under Russian fire control. For example, here on this video, you can see Ukrainian Humvee driving as fast as possible in order to avoid Russian artillery, FPV or Lancet drones. But the vehicle went too fast, the driver lost control, and the vehicle flipped. From here, let's move all the way to Vovchansk and quickly discuss the situation here as well. Here, Russian forces continued successfully storming the city center, and as a result of that, were able to successfully advance and capture this portion of the city. Within the city center, the battles are especially hard, as Ukrainians are fighting for every building and every street. Again, for now, Vovchansk for them is strategically important, of course, until the city will be nearly captured by the Russians. As soon as the fall of the city will be obvious to them, they will claim that the city had no strategical importance whatsoever. Either way, despite hard Ukrainian resistance, Russians continue to push forward, and according to some geolocated footage, were able to either capture or start storming this hospital complex. Russian forces were spotted walking along this street and entering this building, so at least we can assume that Russians are in full control of it. We can also safely assume that if Russians are walking along the street and are not being fired upon, their control within the city is much bigger. Perhaps as I speak or you watch the video, Russian control in this area could look something like this. with those territories being either in Russian control or in gray zone that is closely monitored by the Russians. Russians were also able to advance in the east of the city, and as a result of successful storming operations, were able to capture those territories. This means that Russians also entered Vovchansk from the east as well. As you can see, this recent Russian advance can change the entire dynamic of the battle for this city. With those territories now under Russian control, this entire portion of Ukrainian-held territory is now in a semi-encirclement. And with Russian attacks coming in from the east, north and northwest, Ukrainian formations defending this portion of the city might find themselves in a very difficult situation. And again, if the situation is not to change, they will soon be forced to retreat behind the Volcha River to the southern portion of the city. As the battle within the city continues, Russians are using their superiority in drones to their advantage. For example, here on this video, you can see Russians destroying Ukrainian tank with FPV drone. This tank, it seems, was driving in the direction of Vovchansk to provide supporting fire for the Ukrainians fighting within the city, but as you can see, the tank never made it. From Kharkiv Oblast, let's move all the way to Avdiivka frontline and discuss the situation here as well, where it seems Ukrainians were able to capture this small portion of the frontline with a trench system located in it. Despite that, Russians still control fortifications along this road, and the threat of Ukrainians entering Solovyovo through this road had just presented itself. But if the Russians will also lose control over the trench line located here in this area, we might see the battle for the village restarting again. From here, let's move to Umanske and discuss the situation here as well, where according to multiple sources, Ukrainians decided to retreat and leave the village to the Russians. As I speak, Russians are conducting clearing operations, and perhaps at the moment of you watching the video, village of Umanske will be in full Russian hands. From Avdiivka direction, let's move all the way to Zaporozhye and discuss the situation in Robotino village. Yesterday, I reported that according to Ministry of Russian Defense, Russians were able to fully expel Ukrainian formations from Robotino village and take full control of it. After all, it seems it was only partially true. For the most part, Ukrainians really did retreat from Robotino and took defense on its northern outskirts. This is where their versatile trench network system is located. As long as Ukrainians are in control over it, Russian control of Robotino is to be questioned. If you remember, at some point Russians already did control most of Robotino, but because Ukrainians held control over that particular trench fortification system, they used it to counterattack and retake portions of the village. So if Russians want to take full control over Robotino and ensure that Ukrainians will not be able to retake it, they must continue to storm Ukrainian positions on the outskirts of Robotino, and only with its capture, the Russian control of Robotino will be absolute. With this I end today's video. Hopefully it was to your liking and was informative enough. As always, humanity calls me to condemn all violence against human beings. Have a good day and always remember, Russia will be free and great.